Hello everybody. It has been a while since I posted a new video, as I've been pretty occupied with a great deal of work. I'm part of a local .NET user group that meets under the name of the .NET Engineering Forum, and you may have seen some of the previous videos I've posted. As an annual tradition for the past few years, I once again presented at the December forum, and I suppose it's because nobody really wants to prepare a presentation in December except me. I usually present a random assortment of tips and tricks that I picked up through the year, and I wanted to share an abridgment of this year's forum with my growing YouTube audience as a bonus video. I've added chapter points so you can skip ahead to the tips that you may be interested in, and let me know in the comments your favorite tips and tricks from the video or others that you like. I hope you enjoy this. Well, welcome everyone. This is my favorite .NET Engineering Forum of the year because I get to do a bunch of random tips and tricks. And this year I've got, at least up to about 20 some odd tips and tricks we might go over if we get time, and we'll see what we can do. So the first thing I want to talk about a little bit, just in light of the recent issues that came up this last weekend with Log4j. You might take a look at GitHub. We do have GitHub now as an official repository, and GitHub is really good. One of the things that it has is some really cool code scanning capabilities, and I won't go into and show those today, but just if you're moving and you want to do that, you might consider moving to GitHub because of the excellent code scanning capabilities. All of the future investment from Microsoft, or most of it, is being funneled into GitHub. So it's a good place to be. And it's easy to put our source code there and still use Azure DevOps for our pipeline. So that's something to consider if you want to do that. Okay, so I'm going to move over here, and I'm sharing my desktop. And Windows+V Clipboard history has been around in Windows 10 and has carried over to Windows 11 and been improved there as well. So I have this document here that kind of represents, let's say that you were going out to like Okta and you needed to get a client ID or a client secret or someplace like that. Usually one of the things that you end up having to do is copy this, go to another, I'm going to just pull up another blank notepad, and assume that this is like our code, and I need to copy and paste the client ID and secret. Usually you're bouncing back and forth, copying one, going over, pasting, come back, copying, going over and pasting. But with Clipboard history, I can select the client ID, and I just hit Control-C to copy, and I hit Control-C to copy the client secret. Now if I come over here, instead of Control-V to paste, hit Windows-V, and you'll get a history of your clipboard. So I can paste in the client secret, or the client ID and then the client secret without having to go back and forth. And so you can fill up your clipboard history with a bunch of stuff. And that's a pretty cool trick. But what's an even cooler trick is the ability to...
Tony, you're using Windows 11, right? But this was in Windows 10 as well.
This is in Windows 10 as well. So if you just hit Windows-V in Windows 10 or in Windows 11, the first time it comes up, it'll ask you if you want to enable clipboard history, and you can set that up. If you have multiple machines, so let's go over to here now. So just to kind of show you what's going on in my office here, I've got multiple machines. Right here, this machine is my Surface Book 2, and then this one over here is my Surface Laptop Studio, the brand new Surface Laptop Studio. And it's the one with the screen that kind of does this thing. I don't know if you can see all that, but it's pretty cool. Okay, so that's Surface Laptop Studio. So I have two machines up and running, and I'm going to switch over to, let's see, this one. Okay, so right now on the left of your screen, you should see my Surface Book 2, and on the right is the Surface Laptop Studio. So you can see I've already copied and pasted here. If I go over to this machine and I hit Windows-V in my clipboard history, you'll see that it just came up. It's synced across the two devices, so I can actually paste my client ID and my client secret across machines because it's syncing. So if I come over here and say, no pizza for you, and I hit Control-C to copy, now I come back over to here, hit Control-V, on my other machine, you'll see that there's no pizza for you. So it's a great way to move things back and forth across machines by using the clipboard histories. To set that up, you'll need to go into Clipboard settings, and there's an option here to sync across your devices. So in your Clipboard settings, I have Clipboard history turned on, and you can sync across your devices. I believe that this option will also sync with Android phones as well, and you can copy and paste from an Android phone over to the PC and back. You can't do it with iOS because Apple is restrictive, so that's just the way it is.
Tony, do you have the ability to delete from the history?
Yes, you can clear your history. Right here, you can clear it individually, or so if I want to just delete that one, I can, or I can clear all of my history if I want to. And it won't keep them all forever. It has I don't know how many it keeps, like 20 or something like that in your history. So it doesn't stay there forever. The next thing I wanted to show was something called Snapdrop. So sometimes you need to sync some things. Like in this case, I want to be able to sync between my iPhone and my desktop. Like I want to be able to, sometimes I'll take a picture or I'll take a video on my iPhone and I want it to be able to use it on my PC. So, okay, so now what I've got is I have my iOS phone running right here, and I have my desktop running over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a website called Snapdrop.net. So the first thing that Snapdrop only works on the local area network. Even though it's out on the internet, the way that they've designed it, it works on the local area network. So on my phone, I'm also going to go to Snapdrop. There we go, Snapdrop. Yeah, let's see if this works. Okay, there it is. So what happens at this point is it gives you a random name. On my iPhone, I'm known as Brown Crayfish, and on my desktop, I'm known as Salmon Spoonbill. So this is how you find people on the network. And just for fun, I'm also going to pull up Snapdrop on my other laptop so we can show multiple people. So now it shows multiple people. Here's the iOS phone, my Windows Edge device, which is my other laptop. So what I want to do is I want to send to Salmon Spoonbill. So I'm going to click on that one, and I'm going to select, I'm on my iPhone, I'm going to select from my photo library, and let's see, I'm going to select a video, click Add, and you'll see it's transferring that video over to my desktop. So I can hit save. Now if I open this video, you can see that I took that with my iPhone this morning just after shoveling. And so you can see the mountain, and I'm panning around here and you'll be able to see my house. So there it is, all nice and clean, free of snow. All right, so that's one way to do it. So you can go both ways. You can send it from the PC to the iPhone to the Mac. You can send it to any device that can run basically a browser, a modern browser. I'm going to send one more. Let's send just a photo. I don't know what this is. Let's send that photo. And you can see it's pretty fast. It pops up, gives you the option to want to save that or not. So Snapdrop.net. And now an interesting thing about Snapdrop, this is using a technology called WebRTC, and it's pretty cool. Someday I want to do a demo on how to build using WebRTC. WebRTC is the protocol that is used in the browser to do things like this Teams meeting that we're in today. It's peer-to-peer, direct connection between computers, typically, except for in large meetings like this. They use something called a turn server. But WebRTC will share audio, it'll share video, and it'll share data. Now, in this particular application, by the way, it's open source, so if you want to go look at the source for Snapdrop.net, it's on GitHub, and you can see how the guy built it. It's pretty ingenious how he built it, but what he's using is the data channel to send data back and forth from machine to machine, peer-to-peer.
Is that encrypted, secure?
Yes, it is. So now when you're in because it's peer-to-peer and it's direct and it doesn't go through servers. So like if we were to create our own WebRTC application, you and I, and we were to connect to each other, there's something called a stun server or a signaling server, or some way to signal and find the other person. But once they're found, that's a direct connection between us, and it's an encrypted connection between us. I mean, I guess you could send it unencrypted, but it's typically encrypted, and it's one-to-one. If we add another person in, I guess a third person in, then it starts. The problem with WebRTC is the more people you add in, the less efficient it becomes, because they're all direct connections to each other. We're all sending our video out twice. So if there's a third person in and I'm sending you video, I'm also sending video to another person. I'm using double the bandwidth to do that, which is why applications like Zoom and Team, they use something called a turn server, where I only send my video to the turn server, and the turn server's job is to relay that back out to everyone else. So I'm only using a fixed amount of bandwidth to send my video to everybody. So anyway, I'm not going to dive deep into WebRTC, but it's a pretty cool technology, and you can do some pretty neat things with it. And Snapdrop's one of the coolest.
It would be cool if we had a presentation on that.
It's on my roadmap of things to figure out how to present that one. But yes. Next thing I want to show you while I'm still here on iOS, and I've got this shared up, is the Microsoft ToDo App. There are a lot of to-do apps out there, and Microsoft has one that's cross-platform. It runs on Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, and I use it a lot. It's got some pretty nice features. There are other, like I said, there's other to-do apps out there that have great features too, but like my groceries list here, I share that with my wife. I can share it with anyone. I could make a custom to-do list and share it with you, and we'd both be subscribed to that. And it's a lot of fun when she goes shopping. I know it because my phone starts dinging as she checks things off the list, and usually I'll try to sneak on something else like Oreos as she's shopping, so it pops up on the list. And I can add a task in here as like demo web RTC someday. So I'll put that on my task list, and we'll take care of that. And then if I go over to my desktop, again, it also syncs in there, and you can see my demo web RTC just showed up. Okay, so that's Microsoft ToDo. It works, like I said, across platform, and that's pretty neat. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is there's a cool feature in Windows 11, so this takes me to the next one. Pomodoro Timer. In Windows 11, they've embedded a Pomodoro Timer, and I know that there's some people that really like that. I think Tom Moravia is a big fan of that. Pomodoro in Italian, I believe, means tomato, and I think it has something to do with these little tiny timers that look like that they use in kitchens, and it looks like the shape of a tomato, and it's got a little dial on it. And so this is where this idea came from. In Windows 11, there is a application called Clock. So if I launch Clock, there's something called focus sessions in the Clock, and it gives you an opportunity to set up a Pomodoro timer. So you can say, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be working on code. I don't want to be interrupted. Because it's at the OS level, here's a couple of things that it does for you. When you start the focus session, it will turn off all the dings and beeps. So when new emails come in or someone's trying to get your attention on Teams, it will block that out, or you can control what you want it to block out. If there's something important that you want to allow through, you can. But the idea is, I'm focused. I do not want to be interrupted, and so I can start a focus session. The other thing that's kind of nice about it is I can do this. It pulls in my tasks list from ToDo. So if I'm using ToDo, I can see my task list, and I can see the next thing I want to use is the Pomodoro Timer. And then it also connects into my Spotify playlist. So if I click this and I start the session, now my session's starting and the timer's going. It's blocking out any interruptions, so I shouldn't get any pings like the one that Tom just pasted, the Pomodoro technique from Wikipedia. Didn't show up on this machine because I'm in a focus session. And so my Spotify playlist is playing quietly in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. So, And once it's done, an alarm will ring and it'll let me know that it's time to stop working on my focus session and tell me to take a break. I'm going to stop that for now. And then when it's done, you can see here it'll tell me that I've spent 1 minute on this particular task so far in a focus session. So it kind of keeps track of some pretty cool things. If I'm done with that, I can check that off and it will clear it from my task list. So anyway, Pomodoro Timer built into Windows 11, integrated with Microsoft ToDo and your favorite Spotify list. I mean, is that cool stuff or what? While I was in Snapdrop, here's something else that I was going to show you. In Chrome and in Edge, if you want to turn something, instead of having to always go to snapdrop.net and type that in, if you go under Chrome or in Edge and you go under the apps, and you can add it, you can add a current website as an app. And I've already done that here, and I've already attached, because I use it often enough, I've got it pinned to my taskbar. When you launch it as an app, you don't get the address bar and all that. You just launch this particular app. So it's pretty nice thing to do. You can do the same thing in iOS, which I've also done over here. I have Snapdrop on my, just pinned as an icon there. It's called Add to Home Screen when you do that. I think if you go under here and you go Add to Home Screen, this button right here, that's what allows you to add it as an application. And so this is really taking advantage of progressive web apps, and the more we start moving into progressive web apps, they can behave and act a little bit more like an app, but they're still a website, but it makes it really convenient to launch applications like this that you use all the time. So I'm going to go out to my blog site here. So if you're ever on a blog site, I've been reading, I read a ton of blogs, and I read a ton of documents and stuff like that. And I find that, especially in this pandemic, I don't know what it is, but it seems like life is distracting, and it's really easy to kind of get lost in what you're doing. And so you're trying to read something and your mind drifts and you lose focus, and you got to come back and try and read again. One of the things I've really been enjoying, and this is in Edge and in Chrome as well, if you go to a page like this, you can switch this into immersive reader mode. So that kind of clears out all the extra like ads and nonsense that are on the side, and it focuses just on the application. The other thing I like to do is click the Read Aloud button.
Safely store app secrets in ASP.NET Core. Applications often need to store secrets, such as client_ID and client_secret for OAuth connections or database connection strings. In the old days, it was not uncommon to store these secrets in the code and compile them as hard-coded values. Today, this practice is less desirable,
So you have
external
various
configuration
voice
settings
options.
that can be changed without
really
requiring a
fast if
recompile
you
of an
want.
application is much preferred. However, this new capability comes with a new set of responsibilities. In this article, we will learn about a few different ways to secure our secrets and make them configurable by environment for our applications. It is a best practice to avoid checking in our secrets to source control, where they may be inadvertently or intentionally leaked.
Okay.
Do you use this to fall asleep at night?
It actually keeps me from falling asleep, because as I read along with her, it keeps me awake. When I read by myself, I fall asleep. So, okay. So reader mode is a great way to be able to digest a lot of documentation that help you kind of focus. Okay. Moving on, let's go to the next thing. So let's say that you're out and about and all you have with you is, for some reason, like an iPad or an iPad Pro or an Android tablet, and you don't have your desktop with you or your laptop with you, and you need to do something in code. Microsoft, it's still kind of considered in beta, but if you go to VSCode.dev, you'll actually get a full Visual Studio Code experience in the browser without having to install it. I'm on my desktop here, but this will run in like on an iPad. Heaven forbid, you wouldn't want to do your work that way, but if it was an emergency, I guess you could do that. One of the cool things about it is you can open a remote repository like in Azure DevOps, or you can open it in like GitHub. So let's see if this will let me do it. I'll just pull up my blog post, for instance. And so like if I go to ASP.NET Core, that user secrets document, there it is right there. And so this is pulling it not locally from my machine, but it's pulling it right out of GitHub and being hosted in the browser, and I can make it edits and changes and check things in and all kinds of stuff. It also supports, C# and JavaScript and Python and a number of different languages as well. So VSCode.dev, pretty cool. You can do a lot of your work right in the browser. Let's say that you were working on a C# project though, and you wanted to debug it and run it. It's not going to run unless you also have a code space set up in GitHub, and that's another new feature that they've been working on is code spaces. So if you have a remote machine or a code space running out in GitHub, you can literally run and debug your application all in the browser using remote execution. So pretty cool stuff. So if you're ever in a pinch, just remember that. Oh, and the other thing you could do is remember, let's do that real quick. VSCode.dev. And this works, like I said, on the iPad. If I go under apps, I can install this site as an app. And yeah, I'll allow it to do this. Sure. So now it's an app. And if I go to, how do I find that now?
On your desktop too.
Is it on my, oh, there it is. It's on my desktop. So I launch it. Now it launches without the address bar, and it runs kind of like an app, but it's not Visual Studio Code installed on my machine. It's running in the browser. Crazy, crazy stuff, huh? So as you guys all know, .NET 6 LTS support, long-term support shipped in November. And in fact, today you will find that the 6.0.1 has dropped. Update has dropped. I couldn't get it installed. I tried to, but it didn't work. It's the fastest .NET yet. There's that. It's continuing to improve, expand capabilities. ASP.NET Core was voted the most loved web framework according to Stack Overflow, so that's pretty cool. All right, so one of the things I want to show you is they have this really cool new tool. So let's switch back over to, I'm going to go to here. There we go. Okay, back to this desktop. They have, let's pull up the terminal, Windows terminal. In Windows 11, by the way, the terminal's pretty awesome. You can download this and install this on Windows 10 as well, the Windows terminal, but it ships with Windows 11, which is pretty cool. There is a tool, let's see if I can pull this up here, to help you upgrade your applications to .NET 6. Now, .NET 5 was the first version where they stopped calling it .NET Core, and the idea was that it merged with the old .NET framework, the Windows-centric .NET framework, and the .NET Core framework, and there's only one .NET. And so now they no longer call it .NET Core, they just want to call it .NET. The community as a whole has rejected Microsoft's plan there because they think it's stupid, and I kind of agree with them. So I still call it .NET Core 5 and .NET Core 6. So .NET Core 6 is the long-term support version of .NET 5, and it is cross-platform. It unifies all the frameworks together. The theory being is if you have an old .NET framework 4.6, 4.7, 4.8 app, generally speaking, migrating to .NET 6 should be, I won't say seamless, but less painful than it could have been if it was worse. So let's just go with that. To help you out, there's a tool called .NET, and if you run this at the command line, .NET tool install -g upgrade -assistant. And of course, I already have this installed, so it's going to tell me I already have it installed. But you can do that from your command line right now. Just type .NET tool install -g upgrade assistant. And it's pretty cool the way it works. So I'm going to open up, I have an older application. It's a 3.1, .NET Core 3.1 application. If I can find it here. Where did I put it? Oh, here we go. This old web app. And so I'm going to right click on old web app, and I'm going to open that in the Windows terminal. So I'm at the right prompt. Type directory, and there's the old web app.solution. So the way this works is you type upgrade -assistant, and then the first step I want to do is analyze and I'm going to analyze old web app.sln. And so what this will do is it'll take a look at my project. It'll look at all the dependencies it has, and it'll cascade down the dependency chain. This is a very simple project because I wanted this to go fast enough so we could get through this. But you can run this on your projects as well. So it'll come back and give you a little bit of information. Basically, mine says, yeah, you're pretty good. There are a few things that'll need to happen to do the upgrade. But if you're ready, you can go ahead and say, yeah, let's do it. Let's upgrade it. So when you run the upgrade, it'll go back through and it'll do an analysis, and then it'll show you here there's a bunch of different steps that it wants to run. Right now we're on step 1, which is the next step, and that step is to back up the project. And when it says choose a command down below, it says apply the next step or skip the next step. So I can either back up the project or not. If you're in source code and your source code backed, you don't need to run the first step. You can kind of skip that one. But I'll go ahead and run it, let it back it up. And I'm just going to use the default path. And it says go ahead and do that. So now it went ahead and did the first step and the second step. So the second step was converting the project file to this new SDK styler, the .NET 6. And we'll look at that in a minute in another project and get an idea of what that means. So now it's walking me through. It says, do you want to do the third step, which is to clean up the NuGet references? So I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Okay, now let's go to the fourth step. And oops, what did I do? I didn't mean to do that. Let's press 1, which is the fourth step. So it upgraded the TFM, which is the target framework, from ASP.NET Core 3.1 to .NET 6. Okay, and then it blew through all of those next steps as well. So it updated NuGet packages, added the template files, updated the Razor files, and so now I'll keep continuing on, and we're on the last step, which the next step is finalize the upgrade. And now it did it. So it's all done. It's upgraded our application. So you'll see what it did was it created a folder here for the backup, and that's my old application. And then now the new application, if I were to launch this, I guess I should have launched the first one, prove to you, but you'll believe me that it was on 3.1. Now if we right click on the project and we go look in the properties and it loads, you'll see that it's a console application, it's a .NET 6 application, and it's been upgraded. And if I run this old web app, it should successfully, it's upgraded the NuGet packages, it's upgraded a bunch of code, and it should just run, and there it is. It's pretty fancy. Okay. So that is the Upgrade Assistant. Anybody have any questions on that?
How far back will it convert from?
It says that in the documentation that I read, it said it will go clear back into the .NET 4.5, 4.6 framework stuff. Obviously, the further back you go, the harder it is. And they're continuing to upgrade the tool and put in more features to make it work better, but I haven't tried it on anything that old. It would be interesting to see how it would do it, but yeah, in theory, it goes back quite a ways and will help you do those upgrades. So, okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is file scope namespaces. That's new in .NET 6. Let's create a new project here. And I'm just going to create a console application, and I'm going to create an old one. So we'll call this an old console app. And I'm going to do .NET Core 3.1. So this is kind of what a typical old style application looked like. And you'll see that we have a namespace here, right? This old console app. So in the new style, they've introduced something called file scoped namespaces. And what that means is, I mean, seriously, like, when's the last time anybody's put more than one namespace in their in a single file? It's kind of silly. So what they said is, with file scope namespaces, what's the point of having these braces? So let's just get rid of those. So they got rid of those braces, and then they put a semicolon. Now this isn't going to work because it's not going to be happy with this. So a single namespace can define that file, and everything in that file is in that namespace. The next thing that they introduced was something called implicit using statements. So with certain types of projects, you don't need to have using statements at the top of the file, this using system, because they're common. So you'll find yourself looking, if you look through your project, you always have like using system, system.link, system.generics, you know, whatever it is, like collections.generics. And there's a lot of things that always appear at the top of your file with using statements. So instead, for certain project types, so there's console project types or web project types or Windows project types, the SDK knows what those common types that basically appear in almost all of your files, and so by default it will reference them implicitly, and you don't need to have them at the top of your file and for it to still work. In order to make that work, so I'm just going to try and do this. Let's see what happens if I were to edit the project file here. So if I change that's too hard. I'm not smart enough.
You can just change it to 6.0, can you?
Yeah, I'm just going to change it to Framework 6.0. Where are you? .NET 6. There we go. So now if I go to my C# project, it changed it to .NET or Net 6.0. Now the other thing it did is it put this SDK in here, Microsoft.NET.SDK. Now if I want to support things like implicit usings, I just have to enable those. Now if I go back to Program CS, you'll notice before it had this underline on here and it wasn't happy with me. Now it's happy with me because even though I don't have using system up there, it says that's okay, that's an implicit using, and we're fine with it. So I'm covered. Okay. So this next part doesn't actually work on here. I tried this a couple of times, and there's something not quite the same as starting up a new 6.0 project. But in theory, what they've done is they've created top-level programs. They've removed a lot of the cruft. So if you start a new, in fact, you don't even need this namespace anymore. So we can take the namespace out. You don't need this class or this main method. So you can take all that out. And then basically, oh, it looks like it worked. Well, what do you know? So this is what a new style .NET 6 console application looks like. All that cruft has been removed, and we have top-level programs. So will this actually run? Who wants to run it? Should we run it? See? Well, it ran. It says hello world, and then press any key to exit. So yeah, it worked. I don't know what people think of that. That was some new features they introduced in .NET 6 to make your applications a lot less crufty, I guess, is the best word to put it that. So, okay. One other thing they introduced was something called global using statements. So you've got your implicit using statements, but there's also something called global using statements. So if you, let's say that there's a namespace that isn't in what they call the implicit usings or commonly added, you can add something like a using. Let's do like system.net.http. And instead of having to add that to every file, if I just put the word global in front of that, I only need it in one file, and every other file that I add will automatically import that using statement without physically having that using statement in the application. Now, what a lot of people do is they will add a new class called global.cs, and thank you for all that. I'm still running in an old style project, obviously, but the only thing that will be in this global.cs or global use, actually it's called global usings, but oh well, I named it wrong, but you can name it whatever you want, but most people name it global usings, and then that's where they list all the global using statements for their particular project. So global usings, so that's pretty nice. I'm going to close this.
Scope to the project, right?
Scope to the project, that is correct.
It's a little bit like old header files, if anybody's been programming long enough to remember .h files.
Thanks, Jim, for reminding us how old we are.
Oh yeah, I totally remember those.
Okay, we'll call this Demo Console 6. So this time I'm going to create a .NET 6 right out of the box. And you'll see that when it comes up, 2 lines in here that they have. The next thing I wanted to show was this new thing called minimal APIs. I'm sure some of you have seen some of the demos on the minimal APIs, but what I wanted to do was build a minimal API from scratch so we can kind of decompose it and see what it takes to do this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just get rid of all this stuff. By the way, if you don't have anything in there, it won't run. I tried that. Say, hey, no, you have to have at least one thing in there. Otherwise, it says the program does not contain a static main method suitable for an entry point, so that doesn't really work. Okay, so I'm going to do var builder equals web application dot create builder, and this is really funky, args. Okay, so now we have a problem right now that doesn't work because web application doesn't exist in the current context. So let's just kind of look at what we have in here. If you look under the frameworks here, we have Microsoft.NET Core.App framework, and that's the only thing that it has in there. So I'm trying to convert this into an ASP.NET Core web API, and it's not ready to go. So let's see what it takes to make that ready to go. Let's edit the project file. What we need is a different SDK, and this is the big difference. So if I put .web on there, now it's using a different SDK. Let's go ahead and reload the projects because Visual Studio 2022 wants me to. So now it's targeting the web SDK, and that is going to change all of my implicit usings because it's going to look at that and say, you're doing a web project? Oh, you're going to need some of these other things that are very common in web projects. So now, without adding any using statements at all, my implicit using statements automatically change because I'm targeting a different SDK, and now it recognizes that what a web application is, web application create builder. Interestingly enough, where does args come from? Well, it's main. It's that main method where you pass args in. It's all kind of like implicitly there, but it's still there under the covers, and you can still receive arguments into the main method here. Okay, and then the next thing it says is we can do app run, and so it's giving me all kinds of IntelliSense here, like here's what people commonly type. One other thing we want is a map get, and let's just put the default path, and let's do, no, I don't want to throw not implemented exception. You're a big help. I'm just going to say hello. A semicolon right there. And there is a basic web API application. So let's run this as Demo Console 6. Let's see what happens. So ta-da, amazingly, what does it return? It returns hello in the browser, but it launched the browser for me automatically. So this is just when we started, this was just a console app. The only thing I did was change the SDK and then put a few lines of code in here, and now it's suddenly an API app. It's still console app, but it's an API app. Now if we look under our dependencies, under frameworks, when we made that change, it brought in Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.App. I know that's probably a little small. I don't know how to zoom in on that, but it did bring that additional framework in. So now it has access to that entire framework to do things. Oh, let's go ahead and run this, and let's see if we can get hot reload to work. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't work, but let's see if I can make it work. So I really meant to say hello world. So if I hit save, and I have hot reload turned on, in theory, if I come back, I don't have browser link turned on, so I have to hit refresh. If I turn browser link on, it'll automatically refresh the browser too. So without stopping and restarting, there you go, hot reload. I made a change to code, and it just worked. So let's keep hot reload running. What does it look like if I want to use app settings? So because I set this up as a console, it doesn't have an app settings. Add new item, and we'll call it app. Let's look for app settings. An app settings file. There we go. That's what that looks like. Okay, and now I'm going to add just something called like my key, and we'll have super secret value. And I'll save that Appsettings.json. So how do I get access to that? Well, I can just say var my key equals app.configuration.getSection, my key, and then dot value. So if I put a breakpoint here and we run this, you'll see that it pulled my key super secret value. So this app object here, this builder built web application, has access to the configuration automatically because of dependency injection that happens under the covers. We have access to that, and we can read stuff out of our app settings.json. So it's pretty similar to the way that it used to work before. Okay, so now I want to add in here builder.so how do we access dependency injection? Well, that's what we're going to do here. Is we're going to add endpoint API Explorer. It's so smart; it knows what I want to add. I'm going to add builder.services.add swagger gen. It doesn't know what swagger gen is. Sometimes it's smart and it brings it in. Just install that. Accept. Now do you know what it is? It's not compatible. All right, we're making a mess, so forget that. We'll just keep the API Explorer on. I don't know what I did. I'll have to fix that later. Sorry about that. So that's how you add dependency injection. So before we went in our startup file, if you remember, we had configure and we had configure services. So configure services is basically what we're doing right here. And to make that work, all you have to do is put it between this builder and then the app. So before you do the builder.build, you need to inject all your dependencies here. So that's the structure. And then anything after builder.build, this is the middleware pipeline, so you can add things to the middleware pipeline. So let's add app.use HTTPS redirection. So we can turn that on. And then I think that's about it. Okay. One thing I wanted to show was WSL2 on Windows 11 is really awesome. So I'm going to switch this. So let's say that this code that I've been writing is really going to be targeted for Linux, and I want to test it locally on my machine. Well, on Windows, the way you would do that is in Visual Studio 2022, you have an option to either run it locally or I can run it in WSL. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the first time you run it, if you don't have the .NET 6 framework installed, it will actually prompt you and say, hey, you're running on WSL, but it doesn't have .NET 6 installed there. Do you want to install it? It'll go and do it. Now, I've already done that, so I have it installed on my machine. But this is actually running and launching on my Linux instance, and that host is running from the Linux instance. So if I go out to Ubuntu here, this is my Linux instance that's running. And there's like, you can get access to all this kind of stuff that's here. So it's kind of, so what they've done in Windows 11 is pretty cool. This is WSL2. It's super fast. It works really well. And it's great for debugging and making sure that your stuff actually works on Linux. But from Linux, I have access to, these are my files on Windows. So like my source file right here, that's a Windows folder right there. And so I've got like, if I go to repos, So, oops. So all that kind of stuff. What the other thing that they did was really cool is in Windows 11, they exposed that for you, and they give you this icon down here. So you have this PC, here's all my network machines running, and then here's actually Linux. And you can actually peruse the Linux like directory right in Windows, and you can drag and drop from Windows file system over to Linux file system. It's seamless. It just mounts in here and it just shows up in the Windows Explorer. So it's pretty slick. All right. That's WSL2. Won't spend too much time talking about that. I'm going to copy and paste some code here to make this go a little bit faster. Okay, what I want to do is add a weather endpoint. So I'm going to grab some of the C# code here so I don't have to type it all out. And so I'm just going to add another endpoint. So there's our default endpoint, and here is our weather forecast endpoint. Now, it doesn't have a weather forecast. Oops, I don't need those dots. And we'll look at that in just a second. I'll show you what that is. We need a class for the weather forecast. I'm just going to put this down at the bottom. So it's kind of crazy, all this stuff in one file, but you know, it works. That's why I said I don't know if people will love working this way, but it's really nice to be able to just make a quick API. All right, so we've got this app map get. We're going to map this /weather forecast, and then this is an inline delegate, right? An inline lambda function here that says, well, what happens when someone comes to /weather forecast? Well, we're going to do this stuff. We're going to create this weather forecast array forecast, and it's an enumerable range that starts at 1 and goes to 5. So I'm only going to pull 5. I'm going to randomly create 5 weathers, if you will. And so it's a select index, and I'm going to create a new weather forecast and put that in the array. So the way that this works is this constructor accepts a date, a temperature, and then the summary, and then that populates this. And I also have a conversion to Fahrenheit, which is temperature F goes to 32 plus int temperature C divided by 0.5556 to do the conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So that's what this class looks like. It's a pretty simple class. You got Celsius, Fahrenheit, which is a calculation, string for the summary, and then a date time. So this constructor, I'm passing in the date time. So what I'm adding is taking today, and for each day, so I'm going from 1 to 5, and I'm adding a day to that. So it's going to be today, tomorrow, the next day, so on and so forth. So every time I create a new one. And then using this new random shared next, and it's going to say pick a value between -20 and 55 degrees Celsius. And then summaries, that's what this array is. So it's going to randomly choose a value, and these aren't going to match. So we're going to choose freezing, bracing, chilly, cool, mild, balmy, hot, sweltering, whatever, and put that in the summary so that it looks like we have a weather forecast. So this is what it's doing dynamically. It's building this kind of thing. And then it returns it as an array of forecast. And so let's go ahead and run this. I guess we can continue to run it against WSL. Why not? And we'll just go to /weather forecast. And you can see that it's pretty large. Let me see if I can shrink this. So basically, it returned to us an array of objects in JSON format. So we've got 5 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees. It considers that cool. But if it gets all the way to 42 degrees, it's scorching. 53 degrees is sweltering. And 0 degrees is also scorching. And 29 degrees is cool. So the computer is nutso. So every time we hit refresh, we'll get just different random numbers generated from that endpoint. So one of the things I want to do is I don't know how many people have been using records. Anybody out there use records? A new feature that's not new in 10. I think that was introduced in C#8. If I want to. So you can see I have this class. If I wanted to do this as a record, this is what it would look like as a record instead. And so it'd be an internal record, and I'm going to call it weather forecast. And the weather forecast is, it's the same signature. I'm just going to steal it. So we have weather forecast, make sure it's summary. And then I do have to have this public, this conversion. Temperature F goes to 32 plus int temperature C divided by 0.5556 semicolon. So if I comment out this class, this record is basically identical to that class, but infinitely smaller. Well, not infinitely, 10 lines smaller. But it will do the exact same thing, and it should still work if I spelled it correctly, which I did not. Weather forecast. Okay, so it will substitute in here just fine. It has a constructor. So this is kind of an interesting idea, this record idea. How does it know what the properties of a weather forecast are? Here I explicitly define those properties. Here they get defined by the constructor. So if I'm passing in a date time of date, and by the way, I should make these like capital so that this is where it gets a little weird with records. So normally, a convention is that we use lowercase letters for our arguments. But in this case, because they're also defining the properties, I'm going to make them uppercase so that they're consistent with what a property should look like. The name of this argument is defining the actual internal property of weather forecast. So let's run that again. You should be able to tell no difference here, but that's what a record is. I think records are also immutable, if I remember correctly. And so same thing, it still generates the same stuff. Obviously when it's in JSON, it camel cases it back. So, but in C#, that weather forecast property is capitalized and it's using Pascal casing. So, all right, let's, I got just a couple more and I'm about done here. Let's add another endpoint. I'll just do an app.mapGet/pizza. So we'll do pizza, and I'm going to pass in a string and the flavor. And what we'll do there is I'm going to say, I'm going to use string interpolation. Your pizza is ready. Flavor is the selected flavor. Okay. So if we run that endpoint, and I go to /pizza, your pizza is ready is the selected flavor. So notice I got nothing back there because I didn't put it in. The way that I set it up was it's a query string, so I need to put in like pepperoni. Now it could say your pizza is ready, pepperoni is a selected flavor. So really what I need to do is I need to put in some checks in here. So if I say if string.is null or empty of flavor, then throw new exception in of flavor and a message. Oh, it's message first. Flavor cannot be null or must be supplied or something like that. So now if I go back here and I try to hit that, right, just being a good programmer, if I hit pizza, it'll throw an exception and then it'll return an exception that says, hey, flavor cannot be null. Okay. So we often put these things in, and these are known as guard clauses. And oftentimes you'll see you can get a bunch of these in here. So like, is it null? Is it greater than 2 and less than 4? Is the date within a specified range? We often put a lot of these kind of validators in the front of our controllers or whatever. So I wanted to talk about something, a class that, or a library out there from a guy named Ardalis. That's called the guard clauses. And I don't know if anybody's used this before, but let's go ahead and bring that package in from NuGet. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. There we go. So this thing called guard clauses, and it's pretty cool. You can create your own, but they have a bunch of them out of the box. So a prettier way to write this would be to use guard, and I'm going to bring that using statement in, and then you put guard dot against, and then you have a whole bunch to choose from, but in this case I'm going to guard against null or empty. And I'm just going to put the input, which is flavor, and then the parameter name is name of flavor. And I could put a custom message, so you must choose a flavor, but you don't have to. That's optional. So now in one line I have the same guard clause, and it's much prettier. And I could run it, but it's going to do the same thing. It'll still throw an exception if you don't include it. But what's really nice is these read much nicer than the whole if then else blocks and throwing exceptions. These guard classes do, and there's quite a few in here. You can do things like not zero, or guard against zero, guard against negative or zero. There's a lot of different things that you can choose from, and these clauses they implement iGuard clause, so you can create your own custom one if you want. If you have something special that needs to happen, you can use an iGuard clause and create your own extension method. So that's pretty cool stuff. And then the last two things I want to talk about is date-only classes and time-only classes. These are kind of new in C# 10. Have you ever wanted to just store the date portion only or the time portion only of a date time object and not have to say, December 25th at midnight? It's not really at midnight, it's all day, it's that date. So they have some new classes called date only. So let's go ahead and just say date only, and I'll call this order date equals date only. And then you can say from date and time, I'm just going to say date time dot now. And then let's do a time-only component, order time, time only, and then you say dot from date time now. And then I'll just adjust this, and let's just say and was ordered order date dot to short date string at order time dot to short time string. Okay. One more time we'll run this. And what's really cool about that is it only stores that date component, and you don't always have that goofy, midnight time thing hanging off the edge. So pizza, you do it. Where's my pair programmers helping me here? Flavor?
Yeah, spell flavor. Right?
Ah! Typing is hard. So your pizza's ready. Hawaiian is the selected flavor and was ordered on 12/15/2021 at 10:46. So that's pretty nice to have those date and time classes only. To be able to just store those in there and not have to deal with constantly like truncating the time off or truncating the date off, because all we care is the time. So I really only had one thing left I was going to go over, and that was to show how to write a Chrome extension. I don't think I have time to go over that, but basically I'll just summarize what's involved with writing a Chrome extension. It's really pretty easy. You need 4 basic things. You need a manifest file that tells about your Chrome extension. You need a JavaScript file that's called the content JavaScript file, and you can name it whatever you want, but essentially what it does, so here's what a Chrome extension does, and after I explain this to you, it might creep you out and you may never install another Chrome extension or an Edge extension again. What it essentially does is when the Chrome extension launches, it injects JavaScript into the site that you're on. Like it literally says, oh, you're on this site? Inject my custom JavaScript into it from my Chrome extension. And once you do that, that JavaScript can execute in the context of that web page as if you were that web page, as if you were the developer of that web page, and you put that JavaScript in there. So you can do pretty much anything you want with that JavaScript. You can. So I've done things like I'm like, every page I go to needs to have a purple background. So I have JavaScript that goes in there and it sets the style to purple, or whatever. It does all kinds of things like that. So you need a content.js file. This is optional, but there's also a background.js file, which in version 3 of Chrome extensions will actually run as a worker service. And then you need an icon for your your Chrome extension. And you just put all of those 4 things in a folder. So then if you go out to Chrome or Edge and you go to extensions and manage extensions, you'll notice here that if you turn on developer mode, you don't have to do this once your extension is created, but in developer mode, you can load something called an unpacked extension. So let's see, I think I have one here that I've already pre-written. Where did I put it? It's under source. Oh, it's right here, my extension. So I'm going to select this folder. And now I have this thing called my.ext turned on. And up here on the browser, it's a picture of myself. I have this my.ext built. And now if I go to a page like google.com, you can't tell, but my extension's running and magically it turned Google's background pink. So there's that. Okay. So you also can put something called a pop-up HTML in here. So like if you need to have some configuration or a button that does things, you build out a pop-up.html page and it just shows up right here. So that's another thing you can add. So if we'll go look at the structure of this really quickly, I have a few more things in here because I was experimenting with some other things. But if we look at the manifest.json file, so this manifest.json, it says version 3, the name of my extension, a description for my extension. Let's see if I can make this a little bit larger. The version, it versions it automatically. And then here's where my content scripts are. So this says you can write a content script that will only work on a specific site. So if I only wanted it to work on my mobiletoaster.com website, I could do that. But I say, this is the JavaScript I want you to inject into that site and execute. And I've said on any site that I go to. This is the popup.html that I referenced. Here's a background worker service that I'm loading and running. And then here's my default icon and the default pop-up. I also have an options page that I created, and it's just HTML. And then I've given it a bunch of permissions that I've said, my extension will be accessing these things. I needed to have access to storage, to the active tab, to script and cookies, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so why are we talking about Chrome extensions in a .NET engineering forum? Well, here's why. I've found that some people are constantly going to like a web page and opening up the dev tools and copying out like a token because they want to use it with their Swagger page and test, and they need an ID token or something like that to do that. So they copy it out and then they paste it into Swagger so that they can execute their test against their application with a valid ID token that was vended from like Okta, for instance. Well, if you're constantly doing that kind of work, it might be worth it to make yourself a custom Chrome or Edge extension that would automatically do that. Because it has access to cookies and it has access to storage and stuff like that, if you figure out where that site is that you're going to that's pulling out that particular token, you could write JavaScript that would inject itself into that page so that when you went there, it would automatically pull that token for you and put it into the clipboard. So you wouldn't even have to do any work to go crack open the dev tools to get that stuff out, paste it into your Swagger, and allow you access to test your application. So that's why I was talking about Chrome extensions and other cool things it can do. The other side of that is it should make you wary as a web developer about what kinds of things Chrome extensions can get access to, because you have no control over your users and what Chrome extensions they install and what kind of nefarious things they can do. So if you're storing stuff in local storage or in session storage that really you don't want a Chrome extension to have access to and be able to pick up and use and funnel it off and send it off to Russia or someplace else, then you might want to think about, when I store it, should I encrypt this? Should I lock it down? Should I use a cookie that's bound to a domain or a path? Or, a lot of different types of things that you might consider when you're securing your applications. Once I played with this and saw how easy it is to get access to data, it was a little bit alarming. So Chrome extensions, they're very cool. They're really easy to create and write. But it's also eye-opening about how much access they have to every website you travel to when you leave those Chrome extensions enabled. So it takes a lot of trust there. And that is all I want to talk about for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Any questions before we end this call? Anybody? Okay.
Thank you very much. That was really informative.
A lot of stuff there. So I appreciate you all being on today, and have a great day and enjoy. And have a good Christmas holiday and holiday season, and we'll see you next year.
Okay.
Thanks, Tony. That was awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Tony.